Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to the Cape Lead Revolution. This is Chachi here with a unique kind of friend. You know, he and I started our senior enlisted time United States Air Force together as far as command chiefs by going to the command chief orientation together. So it is an honor, it is a pleasure to have my friend and teammate, the command chief for Air Force District of Washington, Chief Master Sergeant Chris Yevchak. Chris, welcome to the Cape Lead Revolution.
Hey, Chachi, it's great to be here. Great to be part of the Cape Revolution. And to be part of your podcast. And yeah, I mean, this brings back memories to 2015 when we first met, and we had a couple moments during the course of that week. So maybe that'll come up during the podcast, but it is a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate everything that you continue to do to serve our airmen, and that's past, present, and future, because you just never know who's listening, right? And this could really influence some folks to make an important decision in their lives, but really appreciate everything that you're doing from this platform, and I'm just privileged to be a part of it.
Well, I definitely appreciate that, truly. And so for the viewers or listeners who may not know you, if you wouldn't mind giving us a quick little introduction about who you are.
Yeah, so Chief Master Sergeant Christopher Yevchak, I'm the Air Force District of Washington Command Chief. I've been in the position for just about a year, about a week away from hitting my 1-year mark in this position. I'm originally from a small town in Greenville, Pennsylvania, and a little over 25 years ago, I made a very important decision in my life and figured out some things. Wasn't really getting anything to work out where I was from, so I visited an Army recruiter first and was reminded by a colonel in the reserves who lived across the street from us that I was really messing up. And over a Stroh's, he convinced me to go see the Air Force recruiter the next day, so I did. Long story short, I got on a Greyhound bus, and here I am today. But married to my better 9/10, Julie Yevchak, who we met in high school. So we're going on 23 years this June. We have a 20-year-old daughter who's getting ready to finish up her sophomore year in college next week. I've been to 10 bases, been a part of 6 commands, have deployed 7 times. Originally came to Air Force as an aircraft maintainer, a crew chief specifically on C-17s and C-130s. And then I retrained in air traffic control, and then everything in my Air Force career started to change. But I've enjoyed the ride every step of the way, and really look forward to what I have left to do in Air Force and what's beyond that. So really happy to be here with you all today, and look forward to sharing my perspectives and some of my experiences.
Awesome. And so with this, and again, you know, from starting in the command chiefing, like the first level of executive, you know, enlisted levels of Air Force leadership, you know, so starting together, when you look back, you know, those 25 years ago, would you have ever imagined or envisioned that you'd be where you are today?
No way. My initial thought process was, hey, I'm going to go do something different. I'm going to get away from my hometown because there weren't any opportunities there. I'm going to get my GI Bill, going to do my 4 years and get out and go back to college and figure it out from there. Along the way, started liking aspects of my experience and found myself re-enlisting. And obviously everything else kind of took shape, and this became a part of me, something that it just, I think for anybody that goes through the experience, eventually you realize that you're a part of something bigger than yourself, and you understand the significance of your role and the impact that you're having on so many people that you'll never ever meet, and the important work that's being done, not just in the Air Force, but in the armed forces. And to be a part of that is significant. I think anybody that has experienced that, you're kind of finding your purpose. So that's why I'm still here. I can't imagine doing anything else with anyone else, and I've enjoyed the experiences, but more importantly, it's the opportunity to serve and to give people hope and opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have because of what we do on a global scale.
So, you know, that sounds like so many people that I know. You know, there is rarely a person that I meet that joins the Air Force or joins the military, says, yes, I'm going to join here for at least 20 years. I'm going to retire. It is few and far between. They join for whatever reason, and they think it's going to be a passing thing, or they're going to get their benefit out of it, whether it's a trade, whether it's GI benefits, right? Whether it's just kind of escaping a bad situation, or a combination, or all of those, you know, who knows? But, you know, you and I were talking a little bit earlier about, your career was going, and then there was this one, and you said polarizing moment that kind of helped push your career in a different direction. And if you wouldn't mind sharing that story with all of us, I think, for all of us who've kind of gone through those moments, we know how impactful they are. And so sharing that ends up being so huge. So if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So this is pretty much my 10-year mark in the Air Force. And I just recently retrained in air traffic control. And I'm getting my first feedback as an air traffic controller with my supervisor at the time. It's Master Sergeant Steve Lance. And I mention his name because there's a lot of people in air traffic control that know him. At the time, Master Sergeant Steve Lance is sitting down having a really important conversation with me. And that's the important aspect of this, is that feedbacks are important conversations that can make a lasting impact, not just on your Air Force career, but on your life. So up to this point, I'm probably an average airman, an average NCO, to be honest with you. Love sports. I participate in every intramural sport that they could introduce to us. I really wasn't engaged within my peer groups. I wasn't involved in the base or the community, but I showed up to work every day, laced up my boots like everybody else, and went to work. And up to that point, every supervisor I had said, "You're doing great things. Don't change a thing. It's great to have you here. Keep doing these things that you've been doing, and everything's going to be okay," right? Just kind of going through the motions. But I didn't realize that. I didn't understand that or appreciate that. I didn't ask any questions because I was hearing what I wanted to hear, not what I needed to hear. So along comes Master Sergeant Steve Lance, who sits down young, naive Staff Sergeant Christopher Yevchak, and he starts rattling off all of these things that I was average at best. Maybe average was a stretch in some ways. And it just went on and on and on. And it ranged everywhere from being a husband, being a father, being a citizen, being an NCO, being an air traffic controller. And so long story short, he had my undivided attention, and I tended to take things personal, but for whatever reason, I wasn't taking anything personal at this point, because I'm pretty confident that I realized that he had me pegged. He had taken the time to get to know me and to understand kind of what my patterns were and where I was focusing my time and energy. And at the end of this feedback session, he asked me if I had any questions, and I said, "No, sir." And we just left it at that. I went home that night, had an important conversation with my better 9/10, and she pretty much told me, "I've been telling you this for years." And I said, "Yes, you have." And so at that point in time, I changed my priorities, and it's kind of, was a life-changing moment for me. And I say life-changing because to this day, that feedback session remains an anchor for me. And anytime I run into any challenges, or I start thinking that I'm getting lost, or I'm kind of going off course, I always go back to that feedback, and it always gets me back on track. And really, I think that's the importance that feedback sessions can have on anyone, is that it can change your life. And for me, it did. And I know not everybody gets that experience, but for me, that's really a polarizing moment for me.
So how did that go at home? After that conversation, like, I've been telling you this for years, but now because he says it, you're going to listen to me. Like, did that play out well, or was she just happy that you did have the epiphany eventually?
Oh yeah, I got hit from all sides for a good solid week, right? And I deserved it, right? It's this is what we sometimes as human beings have a hard time understanding, is what people are telling us, and they're telling us for our own good. They're trying to help us understand where we can be better, and that's why being honest, being truthful, and telling people what they need to hear is so extremely important in regards to our opportunities to sit down and talk to each other. And that's with your spouse or your significant other, as well as the folks that you work with and for. I think you just have to not take it personal. You have to make it personal, and you have to be open to constructive criticism and to feedback that's ultimately going to lead to you being a better human being. If you just take it in you listen, and you understand that we all have things that we can work on. And these are people that have courage to sit down with you and tell you something that maybe others wouldn't be willing to do. And you have to appreciate that.
So how has that shaped your understanding of communication, whether it goes to feedback, whether it goes to a distinct articulation of blind spots towards teammates, perhaps bosses, subordinates? Do you probably use that seminal moment, but how does that play out for you in a tangible, repeatable way for your interaction with others for providing feedback?
I think it just has helped me over the years. And I've not always been the greatest communicator, even having gone through something like that and having a very important moment in my Air Force career with that feedback. But it's something that I've worked on throughout the years. And so, hey, you have to understand that when you sit down and you talk to people, that's time that's extremely important. And you have to seize that moment. And there's a way in which you can deliver any piece of communication. The positive communication, right? The normal things that we do throughout the course of a day in our communication, that's easy, right? That's comfortable. It's the times that we have to sit down with people and we have to say things that are going to be difficult for them to hear. And our approach to that is important. You don't have to be disrespectful. You don't have to demean people. And I think that that's what I took away from that experience, because my supervisor at the time, he didn't say anything that was disrespectful. He didn't demean me. He didn't disparage me. It just opened my eyes, and he did it in a very dignified and respectful way. And it wasn't a one-way conversation, although it felt like it. But I think that's kind of what has helped me throughout the years, is that, hey, you have an opportunity anytime you sit down and talk to somebody to help them just to be better. And it's not easy. It takes courage to tell people something that maybe they don't want to hear, but they need to hear.
The interesting part that I hear about this, and again, huge credit to you for having the emotional intelligence to finally hear it, right? I used finally, I think, loosely, just because you'd hinted towards Julie giving you that feedback. But it's very interesting, because it wasn't like you didn't have the feedback, or perhaps these weren't necessarily blind spots. I think maybe, was it him just adding that level of emphasis? Was it him sharing a little bit deeper of a perspective to help you personify with it? So what was it maybe about this conversation that made it stick that maybe previous conversations didn't?
Well, when he started talking about my ability to be a good husband and to be a good father, he had my undivided attention. And that's how he started it off. He's like, this is what's most important. The opportunity that you had to serve and to wear the nation's cloth and to be in uniform, to be an air traffic controller, and to do all the things that the military will ask you to do, those are very important things. Those are things that you should be proud of. And you should think that you're a part of something bigger than yourself. And this is the world's greatest Air Force. I get all those things. I understand who you are as an airman, as an NCO, but you only can do this for so many years. And there's going to be a time where you have to take the uniform off and you have to move into the next chapter of your life. And when you leave the Air Force, because you are going to leave the Air Force at some point in time, you're going to take all these experiences and all these memories and all the people you've met along the way, and you're going to really appreciate those things. And you'll take those with you. But what is most important that you take with you is your wife and your daughter. And if you continue to operate like this, I'm not so sure that that's going to be the case for you. So you have to make a decision as to what are your life priorities? What's most important to you? Serving your country and being in the United States Air Force is a huge aspect of that. But what you go home to every day, it should be the most important thing to you. And that's where you should have your mindset in terms of where you should be spending as much time as possible. It's still okay for you to go do all these other things that you like to do, but you've got to find the right balance.
So if you are watching this or listening to this right now, again, stop it, rewind a little bit, and go back to the beginning where I just asked this question about it, because I think it's absolutely awesome that one of the most impactful moments for your career, as it were, was actually really a life event, because somebody had a conversation with the individual behind the uniform. the man behind the stripes, and was able to connect with you on a personal level first, before he had a conversation about performance, technical prowess, your ability as an air traffic controller to make the mission happen. So huge thanks on behalf of everyone that you've been able to lead and mentor because of this polarizing moment, as you said. So that is absolutely huge. And again, I'm a huge, somebody told me this in the past year, right before I'd already turned in my command chief star and I was getting ready to retire. Somebody said, yeah, and they said it so flippantly and it was so amazing. They said, you need to run out of career before you run out of family. And I thought that was such amazing advice. And again, it's just sometimes these conversations are shaped in such a way that you're really able to understand them, the concepts behind it, and the meaning and going forward. So in the 15 years since that has happened, how many times have you shared this story? How many people, have you gotten to connect with and communicate, and people that have come back and say, hey, you know what, Chief, I really appreciate this human perspective that you shared with me.
Yeah, I've shared it multiple times during ALS speeches, senior NCO inductions. I've shared it in my interactions with airmen, NCOs, senior NCOs, people that I have worked for and with. Anytime a conversation or an engagement has gone down this road, I've always highlighted, hey, something that we're really not good at is providing feedback. And that's just doing it from the basic sense, just literally taking the time to sit down with folks and actually go through a feedback session. We're not even good at that. So if you figure out how to make the time to literally sit down with somebody and do a proper feedback, my challenge to you as supervisors is to make sure that you get to know the person you're getting ready to talk to, because that's a human being first and foremost. Secondly, you need to understand what motivates them, what doesn't motivate them, what their aspirations and goals are. What do they do when they're not at work? And understand their strengths and weaknesses. And then when you have that opportunity, knowing all those things, you've got to set them free. And the only way you can set them free is to sit down and have an open, honest, and truthful conversation. And people don't initially appreciate it. Some people are going to take it personal. Some people might not like you, but we don't do this for popularity. It's amazing how in those moments, how people respond and react, but what they do differently moving forward. And sometimes you get a random email or a phone call that's just a simple thank you, because the things that you shared, the things that you were willing to highlight made a difference in their life. That's what's most important. And that's how I've always looked at it. And trust me, I have not always been good at that myself. And still to this day, I have things that I can improve upon. I have not even come to the realization, not even close to it, that I figured it out. I'm still trying to be better in that regard. And it's not easy. And so I just keep working at it. I keep making mistakes, but I'm learning. And that's the most important aspect. This is not easy. We're not good as human beings at telling other human beings where they're not really good, or they need to be better, or they have blind spots or weaknesses. It's just unfortunate human nature aspects that get in the way.
You bet. And there's so much that you ended up touching on with that answer is, again, seeing the human, the individual behind the stripes, realizing what motivates them on an individual level. I'm a huge fan of that, and just being I call it good dudership, right? I think leadership is a byproduct of just being good people that you're alluding to. And that if you can have a good conversations, if you can be a good person, the byproduct that is going to be leadership. But going back to the stuff that you would talk about, leaders and followers a little bit there, if we kind of peel that onion just a little bit, and I haven't asked this question before, so this is kind of cool. If you were to sit like a young airman or new employee or whoever it is to sit down with a first-time supervisor, and you're going to have them both in the same room, and you're going to give them guidance, what would your first pieces of advice be to the follower, and what would your first pieces of advice be to the leader?
That's the good question, Chachi. So my first bit of advice to the follower is just as important as it is for the leader to set a good example and to do all the things that I've already touched upon. It's important for the follower to convey what their expectations are of the leader, what their expectations are of themselves, and what they want to achieve. And I think the advice that I would give to the leader is that don't try to do the cookie cutter thing. Don't try to look at this young airman and say, I'm gonna make this airman into a future chief master sergeant. Everybody is unique. Everybody is different. And the greatness is already there. You just have to chip away at the rough edges and refine it and smooth it out and help them understand their full potential and allow them to be unique and diverse in the way that they are, because that ultimately is what makes us a more productive and successful Air Force organization, flight section, team, you name it. When we allow people to be who they are, I think they gain so much more appreciation for what they're being a part of and what they get to do. But most importantly, they get to be themselves, and that's okay. We understand the enlisted force structure. We understand what everybody is supposed to do in their respective tiers and ranks and their duties and responsibilities. But we need to understand who these people are as individuals and what makes them unique and what they bring to the table and how valuable that is. And that gets lost a lot. I think we try to make people something that they don't want to be. And it's not in alignment with who they are. And that becomes counterproductive.
So you're telling me that you can still be an individual and wear the uniform?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with that, and especially in either contemporary world society or contemporary American society, or even contemporary military society. I think more and more people are seeing the absolute power that comes with understanding the individual, and that leads to everything that you're talking about. There is that no longer are we bringing people into the military where they're just a cog in the works. They're not a gear in the mechanism, and they only have that. So I think the Air Force is doing great, and I really think that since quarantine and COVID-19 has happened, we've really reached out. The Guard and Reserve have been amazing with this, right? For seeing not only do you have your Air Force or military specialty, but they also bring in their civilian specialty. I know a Chief Master Sergeant in the Reserves who's a registered nurse on the outside, so she got a whole different scope and level of responsibilities. But during these troubled times, she's reaching out. So again, just seeing the individual behind and the individual contributions, I'm absolutely in love with where we're going as a society. But kind of going back to go a little bit of your awesomeness, right? So you've been in for 10 years. You have this amazing moment where the things finally click, and you're now finally realizing your lot in life for the Air Force. And then you're a command chief at like 20, 21 years, right? It's hard enough to be a chief at 20 or 21 years, and here you are absolutely crushing it, knocking it out of the park. That is not easy, and the point here is not to kind of brag on you, although it is implied. But like, how does that happen? This is still, especially all that time being born of warfare and deployments of everything else, and being a husband and being a father. How did you find that success?
So I discovered some things about myself, clearly, but I think that really helped me to become better at being all those things and finding the balance. And when I say balance, there's no such thing as balance to me. We have to have the right priorities, and depending on what is going on in our lives or what's going on in the Air Force or in regards to our specialties, our primary duties and responsibilities, we're going to have to shift our time and energy and focus to what is going on at any given moment. And if we have the right priorities, chances are in the heat of the moment, you're more likely to make the right choices and put your focus and energy where it needs to be. And I think it just helped me to manage through all those things. And I became a better airman. I became a better NCO. I became a better air traffic controller, husband, father, citizen. I just was starting to discover all these things about myself, and didn't realize the abilities that my own abilities, right? I didn't realize that, hey, guess what? If you actually open up, the PDG at the time, or it was actually the PFE at the time,
Right.
if you actually open that thing up and you apply yourself, you know what? You might get promoted. And that happened to me. And so that was an epiphany. And then, about 4 or 5 months after that, I'm getting involved in the community. I'm getting involved in my peer group. I'm taking everything that I just received in this feedback, and I'm really trying to make positive changes. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but it takes me back. Up to that point, I'd never received any recognition. Now, when I say that, I've received medals, achievement medals, commendation medals, but I'd never received a quarterly award, never. And I'm sitting at our group quarterly award ceremony, and because I've never really been in the conversation, never been recognized in that regard, I was just there. I wasn't really paying attention to what was going on. And then next thing you know, I'm getting nudged by the guy next to me. He's like, hey, they just called your name. You're NCO of the quarter. I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. And I'm talking to the guy next to me, chewing on my gum. And he's like, yeah, I'm being serious. And then my supervisor, Master Sergeant Lance, turns around. He's like, you going to get up there? And at that moment, I had the realization that, wow, the two most important things out of everything that I've touched on is understanding the importance of time, and that talent will only get you so far. And hard work beats out talent when talent doesn't work hard. And up to that point, I was just talent not working hard. And I was making better use of my time. And from that point on, I just grew and probably tried to just improve myself in that regard, and just built upon all those things. And it worked out for me. It worked for me.
Well, that's awesome. And I think there's a lot of people, again, I suffered some of that same fate. And for me, I call it the process of my hour. And when I first joined, I joined the Air Force. And then around NCO, when I started buying it, became my Air Force. And then as I got older, maybe when I became a senior NCO and or senior or chief, it became our Air Force. Started having that the my hour progression as far as how that played out. So absolutely on board with that. And so looking back on your career, and perhaps not necessarily in a military context, what advice would you have for somebody who's just trying to find success in the world or find success as a leader, even if they're only leading or supervising one individual? What would that piece of advice be?
My piece of advice would be there's somebody out there that is a great example, and you probably already know who some of these people are, and you need to seek them out. You need to find time and opportunities to sit down and to pick their brains and understand what worked for them, what were their experiences, what things stand out to them that kind of got them to where they're at. And it's almost like, hey, how do we get anywhere these days? Well, we get on Google Maps or whatever on our electronic devices, we plug in the directions and it guides us to where we need to go. You need to look at these people in that same sense. They're great guides, they're great beacons, they're great examples, and they will lay out a roadmap for you that helps you to understand things that you cannot connect the dots on looking forward. You only can connect the dots looking backwards. And these people have been through it, and they understand some of the obstacles that you're going to face, some of the challenges that you're going to face. And they're going to be able to give you that altering direction. They're going to be able to recalculate, in a way for you to help you get around that obstacle or that traffic jam. And that's my analogy to that. But the other thing I would say is that, hey, what does success look like to you? Because success looks different to everyone. And I think you just need to simplify it and define it for your aspirations and your goals and what you want to achieve. Because not everybody wants to be a chief. Not everybody wants to be a command chief. People want to be something that they feel is kind of in their realm of possible or things that they want to achieve. Maybe there's something else beyond that. So I think that's okay. We shouldn't try to force people to become something that they're not interested necessarily. But at the same time, be ready to give them that nudge. And then they might realize some things that, hey, there's something beyond this and I can do this. So I think that that's important as well. And I think I could keep going on and on about this, but that's kind of how I look at that.
You bet. And obviously I agree wholeheartedly. And sadly, I kind of did it the opposite way, where I looked around and I looked for people that I thought were awesome. So I tried to personify them. Well, a couple of them, in the grand scheme of things, weren't very awesome. So I definitely like your explanation for that, is trying to figure out and understand why you believe them to be awesome, to find that person with true referent power, perhaps if we just want to, push it down to something. So absolutely, completely on board with that concept. So this was awesome. We'll take this into our first break. So everyone stay tuned, and we will be right back with the Command Chief for Air Force District of Washington, Christopher Yevchak. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back from break. Here with the Command Chief of Air Force District of Washington, and a couple of other things, right? For those of you who don't know, like for the National Command Region, the Air Force has a distinct mission for that in and of itself, which maybe we'll get around to talk to, especially with an election year coming up. That's got to add some different complexities for Chief Yevchak and his team there at the National Command Region. But so like one of the cool things about my career is I too have had that polarizing moment. And it happened kind of very early in my career. And I had a boss who sat me aside and said, "Hey, here's your performance report. I'm going to have you fill one out, and I'm going to fill one out, and we'll kind of see how this matches up." Well, long story short, he and I had a great conversation, and I knew that I was going to get a not great report, as it turns out. And because of technology, you don't see them all the time. So like 2 years later, as I'm getting prepared to try out for a special operations type of unit, I find out he gave me a high marking on this. And I went back and asked him, I said, "Hey, why did you give me this high marking? We agreed that it should be lower because I've kind of been a turd." And he says, "Yeah." He's like, "Tim," he goes, "You're right." He's like, "You were right in the middle between awesome and turd, and I couldn't really figure it out." He goes, "But your ability, your willingness to accept the mistakes that you've made and recover from them and to prove everybody wrong kind of just pushed you over that edge that helped me give you that marking." And that guy was Todd McCabe. So do you happen to know Todd McCabe?
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that name. A great man, somebody that I consider to be a great example for so many things, just as you do. And, going back to our Command Chief course, right? I got to bring this up because we're riding the bus. We're getting ready to go watch BNT graduation. That's the first time a lot of us saw each other wearing hats, right? And I happened to see you over to the right of me, and I saw the beret, and obviously I could tell you're a TAC B, so I asked the Captain Obvious question, "Hey, you TAC B?" And you're like, "Yeah." And I go, "Hey, do you know Todd McCabe?" And you told that very story, and kind of what we were talking about earlier, when I got that really important, honest feedback and got called out for things that I could be better at as far as being a husband and a father. Well, I didn't have to look far, and I still look at Todd McCabe as being a great example of how to be a great human being, how to be a great husband, how to be a great father. And to this day, it's somebody that I still obviously talk to and communicate with, considering him to be my brother-in-law. And I think really proud of what he has continued to do serving in his community as a school teacher, and the impression that he's making on young kids and setting them on a path of success. And yeah, Todd McCabe is somebody that I always look to as a great example. He's one of the reasons why I joined the Air Force, and I didn't have to look far to have a great example of all those things. So yeah, just as you, he really made an impact on my life, and still does to this day.
You bet. And so Todd, if you end up watching this or listening to this at some point, we love you. Thank you so much. And I know you're just a humble, good-natured man who never really thought about his actions, but here it is, all those years ago, you're having impact on currently like one of the senior leaders in the United States Air Force, and I'm old and retired now, but you have a distinct part in my life. You've had a distinct part in my career and what I was able to do and what I was able to hopefully influence. So on behalf of both of us, thank you very much. Thanks for being a good dude. And so kind of with that, as you think of influence, as far as your role as a command chief to being the senior enlisted advisor to your commander, like that is a monumental task. And as you've progressed even through the command chief ranks, getting more and more influence, how do you deal with that? How do you understand that? And how do you approach that on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's a learning process. You just have to learn to understand all the different intricacies of the command, the organization, how it works, understand all the different personalities, and you just always have to be in a place where you can think through some complex issues, and at the same time be able to go from maybe the strategic level conversation to be able to operate at the tactical level. And then most importantly, as you know, we're there to provide that recommendation and that advice. And really, I think all of our commanders that we've had the honor and privilege to work for really take that serious, and the counsel that we provide, the conversations that we have, really plays an important role in the critical decision making that they're responsible for ultimately. But I think what they appreciate more than anything, and I think what we probably need to understand, is that who's going to check on them, who's going to ask them how they're doing. And I think that we can never lose sight of that, because we all have to be wingmen in that sense. And I think sometimes we fail to do that, because I've been guilty of that myself, just kind of going through the daily, weekly, monthly grind, if you will, but never really taking the time to go walk into the boss's office and say, "Hey, sir," or "Ma'am, you got a moment, you got a minute," and just sit down and have a normal conversation. And I think that out of all those things that I mentioned, I think what our commanders really appreciate is the time that we spend just having a normal conversation with them.
And so along those lines, there are so many people out there, whether you're in the military or not, who would just like a little peek under the tent of senior leaders and just hear some of those discussions. As a man who works behind the tent permanently, and you're part of all those big level strategic conversations, what are a couple things that you would like to share anybody, either about specifically in the military and what we do, and or the conversations you've heard about just having a strategic mindset and the understanding or the perspective that you gain from serving at some of those senior levels?
I think really just realizing and understanding that these are really smart people. These are people that really understand things from the strategic sense, and there's a great deal to gain from that. And so it's important to listen, squint with your ears, if you will, to be present and to really understand how they think and why they think that way. And it's not always appropriate to ask the question in the room, but make sure that you take the time and really set aside time to have those conversations off to the side to get a better understanding of their intent and how they think through various issues and so forth. Because listen, there's no shame in my game. I can't tell you how many meetings I've been a part of where I have had no earthly idea or clue as to what was being talked about. And when that happens, I always try to find the opportunity to circle back around with my boss or somebody else and say, "Hey, I wasn't quite picking up what people were putting down in there. I wasn't quite getting that. Can you help me understand what we were getting after and what you were thinking and why you were thinking that way?" I think that's important. But, in our positions, based upon what our roles are, it's very important to understand the commander's intent. And you have to convey that across the command in the organization.
You bet. And then for anyone who's in some type of followership status there, I think a lot of stuff based off of there is, do me a favor, like raise your hand, just ask the dumb question. I always think of Tom Hanks in the movie Big, where he just says, "I don't get it." Like the whole room was actually absolutely in lockstep, but he just asks, "I don't," he says, "Hey, I don't get it." And that provoked conversation. I think to those points is being able to double back around, like, "Hey boss, there was some stuff said in there. Maybe I just missed it. I honestly have no idea, but can you kind of help me gain that so you can help push their message along?" I think is absolutely huge. And then we've kind of been talking about different things that you say, hey, leaders need to do A or leaders should do B. What are some things that leaders absolutely shouldn't do? Or what can they not do from a leadership perspective?
I think the most important thing that I think of initially that comes to mind, and the way my mind works, I'm going to think of something better after this. But as a leader, you cannot afford to not be present, to not be approachable, to not be engaged. And most importantly, as a leader, you cannot afford to not listen. You have to really listen to what people are telling you, and squint with your ears, as I've heard multiple people say throughout the years. Understand and really fully appreciate the challenges and the issues that they are facing, regardless of what you think, because we all have unconscious biases. We all think we have it figured out because we like to go, well, when I was an airman like you, or when I was an NCO like you, this is what we did, and this is how we fixed that problem. You have to remove yourself from that. You have to put yourself in their shoes and understand it from their perspective, so you can be in the best position to provide them the equipment, the resources, the training, you name it, so that they can be more efficient and effective in getting after the mission and getting their job done. Not just in an efficient and effective standpoint, but in a safe manner. I think we owe that as leaders to the folks that we lead. And don't ever ask your people to do something that you aren't or haven't been willing to do yourself.
Okay. And again, that is one of those things that's kind of, I think, just ingrained in military culture, and it absolutely rings true. That is not one of those hollow and baseless things that we end up seeing and or hearing. So the practical application of you being willing to get your hands dirty is absolutely huge. Kind of switching lanes here for a little bit, if you will. What are some of the things, because like people, and I'm working with Chief Master Sergeant Brian Kraselnik out at 5th Air Force, he
BK.
and yeah, BK is just an awesome dude. And much like you're saying, he says, he's like, I'm an intent guy, right? Everything's he focuses on intent, and I absolutely love everything about it, as you alluded to there as well. And then I work with Chief Dave Satchel, who's there in DC as well, and just trying to find ways for people to learn more about leadership, whether it's watching podcasts or listening to podcasts or reading books or TED Talks or articles or whatever. Do you have any favorite articles, books, podcasts, movies, repositories, one way or the other, that you would like to push people towards to help increase their understanding of leadership?
Yeah, so the podcast that I tend to listen to is the Jocko podcast. I enjoy listening to him. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. He just tells it like it is, and I've always gotten a lot from what he pushes. If there's a book out there that stands out to me, there's two actually. There's The Go-Giver, which I've read by Bob Berg, and I think it's a great book that highlights the importance of being a servant leader. And I think another great book that I've read recently, it's called The Trust Edge by Dave Horsager. And I think that you're only going to go as far as trust carries you. And you have to be connected to the folks that you've been entrusted to lead. And that's only made possible through building relationships that are built on trust. And I think once people realize that, it's amazing what you can achieve. But I think The Trust Edge, I just found that to be a very good read for me. And I found all kinds of things within the book that related to my experiences and kind of where I'm at today.
You bet. And I've read the Trust Edge as well. I have not read The Go-Giver. But the Trust Edge, like I don't read, but I do have an Audible subscription. So I do just a ton of audiobooks and take notes. So I like that, where you can do a bookmark, take a note, and then I always dictate into it and kind of write notes and go back through at the very end. And so I absolutely love the Trust Edge and everything that he's able to kind of list out there and go. So huge with that. So, how would you define your leadership growth? Was a lot of it academic? Was a lot of it distinct and focused from mentors perhaps that you had? Was it circumstantial and or accidental as far as that goes? How would you characterize your growth, and what does it mean for you? And I think that part two of that is, how would you like to see that shaped for somebody else?
I'll be honest, Chachi, I think it's all those things. And for me, I once heard a retired general officer say this when he was speaking over in Japan when I was stationed over there. He said, leadership comes from experience and experience comes from mistakes. I'm both a product of experience and many mistakes, which has ultimately enabled me to become a better leader. And to this day, I'm becoming more experienced and I'm making more mistakes. And it's okay to make mistakes. Mistakes are the things that we learn from, that we grow from, that build upon our experience and enable us to be better leaders as a result. And we can share all those experiences. We do it the right way, and you'd be surprised by how many people don't make the same mistakes that you did. And they attach themselves to your experiences, and it means something. So for me as a leader, still to this day, I think that that's the best way for me to summarize my leadership experience, which has been the result of making mistakes, which I still make mistakes to this day. I think we all do. But that's ultimately that one thing that's so very important. I mean, mistakes are a part of innovation. Mistakes are a part of creativity. That's how we grow. That's how we learn. And that's how we move forward. It's easy to just sit there and be conservative and not be willing to take chances. And I would argue you're probably not making mistakes. And as a result, you're not moving forward. And, it's one of those things that you just have to, every now and again, you just have to take a chance, right? Shot not taken is a shot not made. So take more shots.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, the example I use is Reggie Jackson, like Mr. October is also the strikeout king, right? He was either striking out or he was hitting dingers. And, you didn't bench him because he was striking out. You put him out there because he would hit home runs too, Yep. And so the thing I like about this, as you were talking about this, is if you go back to your career prior to Master Sergeant Lance having the conversation with you, what were your bosses doing with some of the mistakes that you were making that maybe they weren't paying attention to, turning a blind eye, not holding you accountable to, right? How does that play out, and how do you view those leaders prior to that pivotal moment in your career?
Yeah, so in that moment, I thought about every single one of those supervisors, and I thought about the things that I'd been lied to about. And some of those supervisors were good supervisors, don't get me wrong. Some of the supervisors I never saw until it was time for my EPR to be written. And they would just simply walk up to me and say, "Hey, I need your bullets." And I'm like, "Who are you?" "I'm your supervisor." I'm like, "Oh." I'm naive young airman. I'm all right. I'll get all my stuff to you, and that's how it kind of played out for about 6 years. And then I go to ALS, and I'm like, oh, so this is what supervisors really should be doing. This is how it's supposed to be done. Oh, okay. And I had supervisors that were involved that were doing feedbacks and so forth, and were giving me that feedback, but nobody ever seemed to really just tell me what I needed to hear. They were more interested in telling me what I wanted to hear and just keep doing these things. And that gave me a false impression of reality. And thank goodness for Master Sergeant Lance, because I'd been in the Air Force again for 10 years to that point. And I don't know how things would have turned out had I not had that feedback.
So, feedback is always a fickle beast. And somebody told me a couple years ago, feedback's a lot like beef jerky. It's salty, it's tough to chew on, but at the end of the day, it's good for you.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of liked that analogy. And so sitting where you are right now and getting the perspective that you have for this being your third command chief gig, from what I'm tracking right now, between Japan, New Jersey, now, DC. You had a small stint on Team 18, and until this thing moved in. So, how would you characterize your career up to this point? Right? I don't know if I'm looking for one word. I don't know if I'm looking for a feeling, but when you hear that, how would you characterize your career? And whether that's your growth, your evolution as a human being, as a leader, as a husband, as a father, what would you use to describe it?
Wow. You might have stumped me on this one.
And so the reason I ask is when I look back on my career, now that I have the benefit of having hung up the uniform, and it's been almost perfectly a year since I retired. I did the skill bridge. So like 1 April last year, I moved to Phoenix. So I've been out of uniform for realistically just over a year now. And when I look back at my career and I think about who I was, and I think about what I've done and where I've gone and what I've become along the way, I'm just really thankful. You know, as far as that goes, I don't know if my career was outstanding. It wasn't crap by any stretch of the imagination, right? I could have climbed higher. I could have done more. I could have served longer. I could have done all of that. But at the end of the day, I'm just very thankful for the jobs that I had, the opportunities that I had. And a lot like you're talking about, I'm very thankful for the failures that I'd had, because not only did I learn a valuable lesson, but I learned a lot about who I was along the way. And so I ended up being really thankful for that.
Yeah, I think I've been sitting here listening to you, and that's helped me, and I've been gnawing on this. So here's what I'll tell you. When I look from where I'm at today, and I look back on my Air Force journey, I'm still the young, naive, ignorant, trying to figure life out Chris Yevchak that got on that Greyhound bus. And when I look at that, I can see my basic military training picture in my head, and I can see who I am today. And in between that moment and where I'm at today, there are so many life experiences intertwined that have shaped and molded my own masterpiece, if you will. And I'm far from a masterpiece. It's just the analogy, right? Mine is unique. It is my story, and I'm extremely proud of it because it's not been easy. It's taken a lot of hard work and dedication, a lot of tough lessons learned, have gone through life and experienced tragedy. I think in all of that, what makes me most proud is who I am still with, that being my wife. I'm proud of watching my daughter turn into a gem of a young woman who has a bright future in terms of her nursing career, and that I see somewhere on the horizon my time coming where I'm going to have to go do something else. And I'm very proud of the fact that everything is on track for me to ride off into the sunset with my family intact. And I think that's what gives me the most pride and satisfaction. My story is unique to me. And I always look back on my Air Force experience and appreciate all those things, all those experiences, all the people that are going to be lifelong friends moving forward. But taking my family with me is probably what I'm most proud of.
You bet. So, thank you very much for just an honest and candid answer, for that look into you and your life and how you reflect upon your career and everything that you've been able to do. But as kind of a follow-up question to that, and whether you would want to answer this for any aspiring person joining the military or joining the workforce, or whether this would be advice to your daughter, what are 3 wishes, for lack of a better term, that you would want for her to have in her life and her career moving forward? Whether it's leadership based or not, what would you want to wish upon any youngster trying to find their way in the world?
For any youngster coming into their own and embarking on life's journey, my hope is that they find something that allows them to be who they are, be unique, be diverse, to have a fulfilling career, and to be in a position where they can really showcase their knowledge, skills, and abilities and their talents, and that they can have a very fulfilling life, one that has great meaning and context to it, that they have their own beautiful family. And when it's all said and done, they can look back on it and go, wow, what an amazing ride. Something to be proud of, something to share with others, and understanding the significant impact that they have left. They have left their mark, right? I think anybody that's kind of going through it, I think ultimately you want good health, success, security, and to really just know that you have left your mark. you've left it better than you found it in every regard. And you're going to have great memories and stories and people to talk about.
Man, that is one heck of an answer. So again, thank you for sharing that with us, and congratulations on your amazing masterpiece thus far. As your friend, I look forward to seeing where your career takes you. But as we kind of wind down the interview a little bit, the two questions I always like to end with are, we'll start with the first one is, what do you do for you? And I see a lot of it on Facebook, which is nice for me. But there's so many people out there who don't realize or understand the concept of putting on their oxygen mask, making time for them, making sure that they're the best individual they could possibly be. Because if you're not the best you can't be the best leader or follower or teammate to anybody else. So the concept of getting right with you isn't selfish, it's being rooted. Because we, again, as I say all the time on the podcast, we focus so much on the fruits of our labor, and we can't neglect the roots. Because without focusing on roots, we're never going to bear fruit. And we need to bear fruit, and we need to grow, and we need to bear fruit that's going to nourish others. So what do you do as a human being, as a leader, as a command chief, as a husband, as a father, to be the right Christopher Yevchak for you that you can present to the world?
I think there's three things that I do. So I get up before everyone else, where I can just sit there, sip on my coffee, and just think. Read a book, listen to a podcast, peruse YouTube and listen to something on TED Talk that might grab me. I don't look for anything particularly, just looking for something that kind of I think might be meaningful. But the two things that I really rely upon is my runs. So running allows me to kind of get away from it in that moment and just to kind of be there, listening to my rhythmic breathing and my feet hitting the pavement and kind of taking in the outdoors in that moment, listening to the music that's playing. But it allows me to kind of just get away, decompress, and so forth. But the other thing that I hadn't done for a long time after I joined the military was to go archery hunting. So sitting in a tree stand in the woods, just taking nature in, whether I see anything or not, was at the time not really, I wasn't fully understanding the significance of it. And then I met Lieutenant Colonel McCauley at JBMDL. And she talked about mindfulness, and I'd never heard it before. I never heard her talk about it before. And this was literally, ironically, coincidental, right? A week from me starting to go deer hunting again. And I'd sat in a tree stand one day for like 5 hours. 5 hours is a long time, right? And I get home, and my wife asked me, "Hey, what did you do? Did you see anything? What did you think about? You were in the tree stand for like 5 hours." I'm like, "Yeah, Julie, you're right. But I didn't think about anything." And at the time, I felt kind of bad about that because I could see her nonverbals, and she was like, "You didn't even think about me?" And I'm like, "No, it's not that. Just in that moment, it was just quiet, and I just enjoyed the quiet, and I was just able to just sit there and be one in nature." And then a week later, I heard her talk about mindfulness, and I think I experienced mindfulness in that tree stand. So I enjoy my time in the tree stand when I can get in it.
That's awesome. So she and I are great friends and good colleagues now. And so I've had her on the podcast a couple different times, and she's absolutely amazing. And so her standing and teaching the oxygen mask is very personal to me. Absolutely changed my life. So I'm a huge fan of that. One of the fun things that I like to ask people here, and this is just kind of just stretch your imagination. Again, one of the purposes behind the podcast is to humanize senior leader type of positions, just to say, at the end of the day, it's just two dudes having a conversation here. So when I do the executive transition assistance program, we had to do this kind of expand your mind exercise, and you had to list out all these different things, planning for the future. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And one of those questions, which I want to ask now, obviously, is what would you do in life if money were no object and you knew you could not fail?
I would be a season ticket holder for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Nope.
I'd go to every Steelers game I could go to. I would travel the world, but the first place I would go would be to Prague, because that's where my family is from, and I have yet to make it there. And so that would be the first place I would go, but I would travel the globe and get a better understanding of all the amazing cultures that are out there, all the experiences. And then I would make sure that I find my spot in the Caribbean to anchor down, and then just live life to its fullest from the shores of maybe my own island. I don't know. But if money were no object, that's how I would see it. But hey, I can't forget about the importance of giving to others. So I would make sure to share that wealth and to donate to all the great causes that are out there that mean the most to me and so forth. So I think that can't be lost in this as well.
You know, we had an hour of you sounding smart and competent and credible, and then you bring up Steelers fan.
Yeah.
So that if the people out there are watching and listening and you're hearing that sound, that weird sound, that's him hemorrhaging credibility. And I can talk smack. I'm a Browns fan, right? So who am I to judge for being a Steelers fan? But yeah, I love it, man. I mean, that's the best part about being human beings, is we all want different things, and who's anyone to say what success looks like, as you had alluded to earlier. So I think that's pretty awesome, my friend.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This has been great. And trust me, I hope that this has made a difference for those that maybe are listening out there. This has helped me immensely. I think clearly I'm just an ordinary dude that has learned over the course of time that you got to put in the work, you got to push yourself, you got to get uncomfortable. And trust me, this is not easy to get on a podcast and to just talk in this regard and to be seen on social media and so forth. I mean, but this is healthy for me as well. So I've really enjoyed the moment.
You bet. And again, it's already helped me, right? This is great. So whether it's further building upon my love for leaders, or catching these different nuggets, or again, just getting more tangible application to some of the concepts that I hold dear. And obviously those being caring, alignment, perspective, and expectations. And so many that just kind of draws back to Master Sergeant Lance. You know, none of that could have happened if he didn't care. If he didn't care about you at all. And then he had to figure out how you were misaligned with all the things that was going to take to make you a successful airman, husband, father, all of that. And then he's sharing his perspective along the way. And then lastly, he led a solid expectation for you. And the expectations for you, and again, as an airman, as a husband, as a father, as a human being moving forward. So again, you don't have to look very far to understand the concepts of CAPE and how they apply in nearly every situation throughout the world. So Chief Master Sergeant Christopher Yevchak, the Command Chief for Air Force District of Washington, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it, and I'll leave it to you for just a little bit more closing remarks.
Ed, just for any of you out there listening, just understand that hey, this is an interesting time that we find ourselves in. It's a difficult time, but hey, just understand that we're all in this together. We're all going through it together, and there's so many people out there that care about you. So continue to stay connected, continue to stay engaged. Look for opportunities like this to listen to what other people have to say. I don't think that I have figured out anything. I'm learning as everybody is. And I'm always trying to seek what other people have to say, their perspectives, and it helps me to get a greater understanding of what's going on in the world and some things that we should be thinking about. But hey, Chachi, I would be remiss if I didn't further highlight the significance of what you did in your Air Force career, what you achieved, all the people that you have impacted, and the people that you continue to impact through the Cape Revolution and doing this podcast and being on Quarantine University and allowing us to have a platform to connect with each other as leaders, and most importantly, to connect to everybody out there that's listening. I mean, it makes a huge difference, and I know that people are getting a lot out of this. So I can't thank you enough for what you continue to do in service to others, and it's just a great example of servant leadership.
Well, I definitely appreciate those kind words. And again, just like you, I myself am a student of leadership. And if I can help bring something to the table that maybe people can learn from and make them better, absolutely want to do that. So again, I definitely appreciate your time, my friend. And thank you all for listening and watching. Thank you for joining in. We'll catch you here next time on the Cape Lead Revolution. And this is Chachi reminding you to always educate, anticipate, and dominate. We'll talk to you later, everybody. We'll see you. Bye-bye.